me for 31 years, for crying out loud. The last 19 of which has been the most loveliest time in my life in my relationship with her. Like I said, she looked me up in poker rooms. We were friends. So the third time one of her boyfriends went to jail, we were out having drinks at the Union Plaza Casino, listening to music. And I just said, to hell with all this. I am going to make a move. And I did. And so I did. And so anyways, I'm not going to go any further into this story, Susie, except for the fact of how we met again. The last time I saw Susie was probably Christmas of 1990. Never saw her again in my life. As you guys know, if you know from my story, I ended up in the hospital in Las Vegas after 7-year heroin addiction, and came back home to the Bay Area here and got clean. And so went to school, got my KDAC counseling license to be able to go work in a program, which I did. So in 2001, I think it was like 2 weeks, maybe a week or two after 9/11, I was at a conference, and it was really weird because it was a KDAC conference, and we had a booth. The program I work with has a booth. I'm not going to mention their name, but so it was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday was this conference. And so myself and this gal named Regina were going on Thursday. My program director and another counselor was going on Friday, and then assistant program director was going on Saturday. So as fate has it, I'm here at this meeting, and it's just like a KDAC, vote, raise your hand and vote for this bill meeting, which is boring as hell to me. So I told my friend, I said, I think I'm just gonna walk. I was looking at the brochures. I had these brochures and all these different workshops that afternoon, right? So I'm reading, and I see this one thing here. It says, Susan Foreman, Prostitution Outreach, Vallejo. That looks good, Susan. I think I'm making me a drink of water, too. I don't know why I'm nervous. I don't know. Anyways, because maybe she's sitting here listening to me tell the story. So anyways, I tell Regina, I says, I knew a Susie Foreman or Susan Foreman. Susie Foreman, I said. It said Susan Foreman on the brochure. I said, I used to know a Susie Foreman back in Las Vegas, right? So I leave the ballroom. I walk through the lobby. As I'm walking through the lobby, the door opens, and it's Susie. Me and Susie standing there looking at each other with, this was better than when Harry met Sally, for crying out loud. So Greg met Susie, okay? And so she said, I remember saying to me distinctly, she says, I didn't know whether to slap the shit out of you or kiss you and give you a big hug, right? She says, I have done so much effing work on you in my recovery. So as it had it, from that point there, me and her left the conference, walked across the street to Denny's, had a cup of coffee, and we just caught up on a lot of stuff. And so I think I'm going to take it from there. That day, actually, that I met her, saw her again in that Holiday Inn in Emeryville, California. We were talking about lunch at the time, but she was going out to lunch. She had a couple of girls taking her out to lunch. Was it 7 or 8 years, Susie? Was it 7 or 8 years you were celebrating in 2001?
8.
8 years.
Yeah.
So she was going out to lunch with some of her friends to celebrate, her 8 years clean and sober. And so after that, we exchanged numbers, and, the rest is history. She's my dear friend. I love her to death. Please listen to her share. She's sponsored all kinds of gals. She's a sponsee, and she's a sponsor, and she just has a wonderful story. So I'm going to turn it over to Susie. Susie, it's all yours.
All right, Greg. Thank you. Thank you, David, for having me also. I really appreciate it. I love to talk about recovery because it's a big part of my life, and it has got me through so much. Life, shows up too when you get clean and sober. It doesn't mean that you're going to have good days all the time, because I've gone through a lot of struggles. I'll be coming up on 27 years clean in September, and I'm truly grateful for every year, because I struggled a lot during those 27 years, but I didn't pick up and use to help with that, because I can do that. I can shut my feelings off real easy. And I know how to do that really well, and I don't have to do that today. I can work through my problems and able to reach out to other women in my support group today to help me with that. I never thought that, there'd be a day that I would become an addict. I was raised by a very good family. My dad was a hard worker. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a sheet metal worker in San Francisco. My parents owned 2 bars and a hotel. And everything really looked good on the outside, right? Nice, wealthy family, brand new home built. I go to Catholic school. But what ended up happening was that, there was a lot of drinking going on and a lot of fighting with my mom and dad. And I pretty much, basically my mom and dad divorced, and my dad got custody, and we moved from Fairfield to Vallejo because he had a home for his mom that he bought. And we went to go live with her because she was getting old. And so my dad got custody, and I pretty much got to do whatever I wanted at a very young age. And I had the whole downstairs to myself. I eventually started using and drinking at the age of 12. I remember going to Catholic school in the morning, and before I'd go, I'd drink some Strawberry Hill wine. And, and that's how it all started, and then I started, smoking weed before school and everything else. And so during that time, I always hung out with people that were always older than me, 5 years older than me. And I hung out with a couple of the guys down the street who were, 5 years older than me, and they were doing drugs, and I started experimenting. And then I fell in love with our paper boy who came back from the Army, and he's my son's father. And we wanted to get married, and we did. And I got married at 16. My dad let me, he went with me, him and my sister. My mom did not want me to get married. She told me I was going to school the next day, because after they divorced, my mom and dad did get back together. So then I ended up getting married, and I married a man who was a heroin addict. I hadn't experimented with heroin. Well, I did experiment with it before I got married, yes. And but I just really kind of didn't like it. And I just choose to do a lot of reds. If anybody's, my age, what reds are, and yellows and all the downers. And so I was doing a lot of pills and drinking a lot and just doing what I wanted to do. My family basically did not really care if I got married at 16. I went and left. So I pretty much left, and we moved to Fresno, and we lived there. And then things did get, crazy and worse. So we moved back to Vallejo, where my dad put us in an apartment. And, we were both on welfare. And so then I ended up getting pregnant at 18, and I had a beautiful little boy, and I was so happy. And but the marriage didn't last. It was back and forth, off and on, off and on, off and on. We were doing a lot of drugs and drinking, and my son, I had him, and so eventually, we kind of went our own separate ways. And what it ended up happening is that, my dad pretty much took care of me and my mom, and then my dad passed away, and then my mom was doing everything she possibly could. And so finally it got to where, I couldn't hold a job anymore. I was probably probably 24. Scotty was probably about 6. I was probably 23, 24. Scotty's about 6. And in that meantime, I had got in a relationship with a man that was a heroin addict then, and I got strung out. I got hooked. I got hooked on heroin, and it was an awful thing. And I couldn't believe it that I was, because I had told myself early on that, I'd hung around a lot of people that, were heroin addicts and shot a lot of dope. And my thing was that's one thing I'll never do, is stick a needle in my arm, And it eventually happened, right? So what ended up going on was, while I was with this man, we were dealing a lot of dope and out of his house, and we were mostly selling to all the prostitutes. In the morning, they'd come and want to get fixed before they go to work. And I told myself, God, I could never go out and do that, sell my body, So anyways, what ended up happening, we got pretty strung out. We were pretty sick. And, the cops were pretty much on to what was going on and all the drug dealing we were doing. And I had my son with me this time. And, he was having to experience all this, and it was totally, I look back at it now and I think, how dare I? How dare I? But the disease takes over. It takes over and everything is put to the side. The only thing that matters is how am I going to fix this morning? How am I going to get loaded this morning? So what ended up happening was my son got to be traumatized by a lot of stuff. He got traumatized by banging on the bathroom door many, many times, begging me to come out, and said, I know what you're doing in there. Because that was practically where I lived, in the bathroom, shooting dope, And my family was pretty much disgusted with me. My mom, they knew what was going on over there. And the man that I was with, too, he was a woman beater. He would beat me really bad. And, I'd lie about the bruises. I'd lie about this. But, he was a connection, too. That's where I was getting my drugs for free. And since I was hooked, I needed him. So what eventually happened was, we were both pretty much getting to the point where we really wanted to be done. And we knew the police, there was going to be any amount of time that we were going to get raided. And so we decided to move to Vegas. I had a girlfriend and her husband that were strung out here, and they moved to Vegas, and they got their shit together, and they got jobs, and they were doing really good. And they had offered us to come there. And so we went there, and, we kicked off heroin, and it was very hard. It was very hard. We just basically stayed in a bedroom and threw up, and we're in screaming pain, and our bodies ached, and we fought through it. And it was the worst thing I ever had experienced in my life, is going through a heroin withdrawal. And so my son had to also experience that, because he was with me. And I'll never forget, right before we left to go to Vegas, there was, we decided we were going to cop and do one last shot, before we quit. And I apparently did too much. And and the sad thing about it is, they talk about the children caught in the crossfire. And my son's in the back seat, and I'm trying to, fix and shoot dope in my arm. And I'm always telling my son, turn your head, turn your head while I do this. And it's so sad because, what happened was I did too much, and everybody was pulling me out of the car, and they were trying to walk me and trying to wake me up, and my son had experienced that. He had experienced not knowing what was going on with his mom, and at the time, you don't look at it like that. At the time, when you're strung out and you're sick and all that, just like I said, nothing else matters. Nothing.
I just want to chime in. Can you hear me, Susie?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I want to chime in just for a second. I just want to say this because I see how you're feeling when you're doing this right now. I just want to say that she has her son in her life now. Beautiful granddaughter, her son just given her recently, I don't know, 5 years ago. Annabelle, 5 years old is she? Annabelle?
She'll be 6 this month.
She'll be 6. So, she's came back. It's just painful to hear this. And it's real, guys. I told you this is Susie. She's been there, done it. She's get better. And she has a wonderful life with her son and her granddaughter. Go ahead, Susie.
Okay. So what ended up happening was, I was able to come out of it and get back in the car, and we headed towards Vegas. And and then we got there, and that's when, I said we basically just locked ourselves in a bedroom and kicked for a whole week. And I eventually got a little job, and he got hooked back up with the electricians union, and, we're doing okay, and we're trying to look for our own place. And, I got my son registered in school. We're still drinking. We're not totally clean. We're still drinking, right? And so eventually we got our own place, and we're doing really, really good. And I learned to be a 21 dealer. So I was a 21 dealer in Las Vegas for quite a while. And basically what ended up happening is while I was at work, my boyfriend that I was with, that when we came to Vegas, right? He hadn't shot any dope it'd been over a year, right? And we got into a big argument. And I had told him I wanted him out of the house. And the sad part was he was in bed with another woman when I called home for him to come pick me up from work. But my son answered the phone, and my son said, let me talk to him. And he said, Mom, I can't. And I go, what do you mean you can't? And so here, once again, my son is traumatized, right? My son says, because he's in bed with a girl. And I said, he goes, please don't tell him, please don't. So my son was terrified, because George was abusive. I've never seen him lay his hands on my son, but I knew how he talked to my son, which was not okay. It was not okay. But once again, right, I'm in this domestic violence relationship. I am so sunk into the sickness of all this. And so I told my son, don't worry about it. Don't worry. I won't. No worry. I said, I'll call back later. So I didn't want to put my son in the middle. So I called back later and he answered the phone. And I basically just told him, I said, you need to pack your stuff and you need to leave. And I said, I know you were in bed with another woman. And so he said, you don't know what I'm talking about, blah, blah, blah. And it was one of your friends and she needed a place to stay for, overnight. And I told her, well, Susie won't care. Just go ahead and sleep on the couch, and then I went ahead and got up and told her, go ahead and get in the bed if you want. I'm up and, whatever, right? It's like, okay, yeah. But the thing is that I told him I wanted him to leave and, and I didn't need a ride home. He didn't need to come get me. And so he still came and picked me up and was trying to tell me, about everything that was going on, blah, blah, blah. And, and I just wasn't buying it. I wasn't buying it. So, I got home.
Good for you, Susie. You shouldn't be buying it.
So anyways, what happened
Let me say one more thing. Let me say one more thing. So you heard Susie when she stopped using heroin and that, but they still drank, right? So drinking counts, guys. You're not clean and sober if you stop heroin and crack and you drink. So just know that. Go ahead, Susie.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So then, so what ended up happening was, is that when I got home, my son was with the neighbors. They went fishing. Him and his grandma, his friend's grandma took him fishing for the day. So I was really happy he was not there during this argument. So anyways, I ended up leaving. I said, when I come back, you better be gone. And so I left. And then when I called back, I called and there was a man answered the phone. And I said, I don't know who you are, but you need to let me talk to George. His name was George. And he goes, well, I'm sorry, ma'am. He's not here. He's at the hospital, but we need you to come home right now. We want to talk to you. And I'm going, well, I said, I'm going to the hospital. So I assumed that George got drunk because he was an alcoholic, even though he quit heroin. And once in a while, we were smoking crack too, so all that disease did not stop. All the insanity was still there. We got off the heroin, but then we picked up something else. That's what addicts do, right?
Yep.
We'll just keep doing whatever we can do. So I ended up going to the hospital and I walked in and told them that I needed to see him. And they said to me, I'm sorry, ma'am, he's dead.
Oh, geez.
You have to wait over there.
Mm.
And that's exactly how they told me. And I was just devastated.
Mm.
And then the detectives came and they wanted to talk to me. And they literally asked me if I killed him because I told them I found him in bed with another woman. And they asked me if I killed him. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I didn't kill him. Because what had happened when somebody was there and called 911 and said, there's a man that's overdosed here and left him and to die. And they found him and he had shot some dope. I know for a fact he didn't do it to commit suicide because he had a pocket full of money and he only spent $20 of that money. And I knew exactly how much money he had when he got paid. And so
that's my Susie. Don't have much money.
I knew that, but what it was he has not shot any heroin in over a year and he'd been up all night drinking and that combination will kill you. And that's what happened. It killed him. My son was taken away from me during that time for about 3 days and he was put in a child's home until more investigation was done. And my sister said, do you want me to come get him? And I said, no, I'm going to go to court. I'm going to fight this. And of course, when they ransacked the house, it didn't look good because there's, needles around and, and he's dead in the bathroom and all that. So I ended up getting everything all cleaned up and, and I was working at that time too. So I ended up getting him back. And the hardest thing was for me to tell his dad that, that his son had passed away, but he knew that his son had a serious drug problem all his life. But what ended up happening was there Susie is, right? So I'm alone with my feelings. Okay. I'm alone. I'm scared. I'm grieving, and I'm not okay. So what ends up happening is that, I'm starting to get loaded, not on heroin, but I'm starting to drink a lot after work. I'm starting to smoke a lot of crack. I'm starting to do a lot of coke, snorting a lot of cocaine, and eventually what happened is I got fired pretty much from every job, every 21 job I had, because I was always asking for a front from my check 2 days after I got paid. And when you deal 21, you get tips too. So they knew something was up. So I was calling in a lot. So what eventually happened was I had, lost my job. I had ended up meeting another guy, and we were together for a while. And then he personally, didn't want me. So I ended up being on the streets. Well, what happened with him was I turned him on to crack, and we both turned out to be a hot mess. And what happened was he went his own way. I went my own way. I called my sister and said, please, can you take Scotty? I'll put him on a plane. I can't take care of him. And that was a hard thing for me to do, but I didn't want to drag him around from motel to motel and have him. He'd already seen enough. He'd already seen way more than any child should ever have to experience in their life.
Susie, can I ask you something? So how did he experience that with you whenever you told him that you were sending him home? How did he experience that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How did he experience it when you told him, Scotty, that you were going to send him home to be with your family? Can you hear me?
He really didn't. He really didn't say too much of anything. I think he probably was glad, to be honest. I think that, because he knew how his grandma was and he knew how his aunt was, and they were going to be the ones taking care of him. And that he knew when he was visiting them that he was always safe, right? Mm-hmm. And so, he was okay with it. He basically didn't say, no, I don't want to go or anything like that, and I can understand why. I can understand why, I'm his mother, but I wasn't present. I was never present. And so he missed out on so much in his life, so much, of growing up. So I sent him home, and then it was just me.
What year was that? What year was that you around that time? Because I met you in '89, I think.
Probably 89, 90.
Right about when you met me.
Mm-hmm.
A year within the year, right? Because I remember we got together at one time. You got arrested for prowling. Remember you were prowling? You went to get something to eat one night, right? And so the cops knew her really well, right? And so she didn't come back. I mean, all night, not back. And then I found out that she was in jail, and she told me they arrested her for prowling. I never knew what prowling was.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is that I lost the apartment, of course, right? I'm basically homeless on the streets. And I remember, women, going out and turning dates and stuff for money. And, and I had met some of these women, and they were just, basically, back in my mind, there was that thought that, I always told myself I'd never go to that level. Right. Mm-hmm. And, but see what happened was, the drugs took over, and I had no job. I had nobody. And I didn't want to feel the pain of being homeless, sending my child home, losing everything I had, my morals, my values, all that. I wanted to be totally done, and all I wanted to do was to get loaded, to not feel the pain anymore. And so I remember going and going, okay, well, here goes. So I remember, once I did it, that was it. I was out there every day, trying to make money by selling my body. And so I was prostituting quite a bit. And I can continue to get arrested and back on the street and get arrested. And then, like Greg said, it was probably about 5 a.m. The sun was coming up, and I was walking down the street. And I remember seeing Greg. I didn't know him. He was on one side of the street. I was on the other. And, he was dressed really nice. And my first thought was, he's a cop.
Part of my hustle, Susie. I sold it pretty well.
He finally waved me over, right? And I was like, should I talk to him or not? So I went over there because I was out there trying to find some money, right? So I can buy some crack. And I said, yeah. And he goes, hey, what's up? And I said, nothing. What's up with you? And he goes, I'm trying to get something. I said, oh, really? What are you trying to get? And he goes, well, I want to, to get any crack. And I said, are you a cop? And he goes, no, man, I'm not a cop. And I said, gosh, man. I said, well, why are you're all dressed up and stuff? He goes, well, that's my hustle. And I said, all right. So I thought, man, should I take a chance to go get this guy some crack or not? So I said, all right. So, I said, all right, you got to give me the money. You can't go with me. You got to give me the money and I'll bring you back the crack. And he goes, I don't know. Well, yeah, you're going to bring it back, right? And I said, I promise I'll bring it back. And I wasn't the kind of girl that wanted to rip people off or do any of that, so I got it and I copped and, he said, you want to come smoke it with me? And I said, sure. So I'm waiting. Any minute I'm going to get arrested, right? So, any minute I'm going to get arrested. This is, So anyway, so we went back to the room and we started talking and he didn't want anything from me. He didn't want to, have sex with me or anything. And, and I, and he was really, really nice. I have to say he was really, really nice. And we smoked crack and we talked and he talked about his life and I kind of talked about my life.
I was a real, what did you say? I wasn't, nice, you said. What did you say that I wasn't? I
said you were really nice. You were a gentleman.
Really nice. I was a really nice crack addict. I became a nicer heroin addict about 2 years later.
Yeah. So eventually we became friends, and the whole thing was we hit it off as really good friends. I respected him for respecting me. And, and so, he told me, he goes, hey, you can always find me in poker rooms and stuff like that. And, and I said, well, you can find me probably out here. I
was a respectful crack addict too.
So what ended up happening was, he would always find me and go, hey, let's go get some crack. So, and I would, and, we'd go get loaded and get a room and nothing would happen. And we had friends out there. We'd say, hey, you guys want to, come over, we're going to get loaded and blah, blah, blah. And we drink, we gamble. And Greg taught me how to be a really good Texas Hold'em player. Yes, he did.
That's right.
So I'd go in the poker rooms and I'd always sit behind him and he'd play and, and I learned how to play and he would teach me over and over, and then there was times that, he wouldn't see me for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I would try to find him and I'd tell him, I said, Greg, I am so tired. I haven't been to sleep. I've got no money. I just want to go to sleep. And he said, just come here. He goes, I got a room so-and-so. I'll give you the keys. You can go up there and sleep for a few days. And he was always going to, he always was there for me, feed me, take care of me. Right. And then,
I remember that really well. I remember that.
Yeah. And so, I always knew I could count on him, as a friend to go ahead and help me out, and then it got to the point where, I don't know, got to the point where we started feeling like we were feelings for each other. Yeah. And so we did, and we did. And, it felt good. It was right. He was a good hustler. He taught me how to be a good hustler, but I already knew how to hustle, but he wasn't liking that too much after a while. After we got together, he was not really liking it, and, but, I needed to get money to smoke crack and he had his hustle and, so, but what ended up happening was that, I ended up getting pregnant and we had a child together. And I think we shared some of that at the last story, but the gift was that, I knew what I had put my son through, and there was no way that I was going to put this little girl through. And so I had decided that to give her up for adoption. And my mother came down, and she came down one point and kind of got me out of jail and told me she's going to take me home. And she said, but first I really need to think about what I'm going to do about the baby. And, and that was really, really hard. And when I had the baby, Greg wanted nothing to do with me. He was just tired of me, going to jail for prostitution. And so it got to the point where, he wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. And, but neither one of us was in any shape to take care of a child anyways. And Greg eventually got strung out on heroin during this time. And I remember the night that he was going to, do some heroin because somebody had it. And they knew Greg had a pocket full of money, and they said, man, you should try this. And, and I said, Greg, whatever you do not do it. I said, man, do not